Ya, ya. Oke. The first presenter, I would like invite Bapak Fahri Reza Ayub. Time is yours beserta partnernya Ibu Lita Pratiwi and Bapak Andi Tamsil dan Ibu Padma. Silahkan. Time is yours.
This is share screen. Okay.
Ya. Oke, silakan Bapak.
Okay. Thank you very much for the moderator to give me the chance for presentation. The title of our research is Local Wisdom for Coral Reef Conservation in the Spermone Islands. The authors, me, Fahri Reza Ayub, Nurlita Pertiwi from Universitas Negeri Makassar, Andi Tamsil from Universitas Muslim Indonesia, and Fatma from Institute Technology and Business Balikdiwa Makassar.
Okay.
Indonesia. Introduction. Indonesia is one of the mega biodiversity countries and biodiversity mega centers. Coral reefs have a lot of function. They are ecological function, economic function, and socio-cultural function. But at the time, according to the news and the research, the coral reef have were damaged because of natural factors or autogenic and human factors or anthropogenic. They are land-based activities and marine-based activities. Local concepts that are wise, full of wisdom, of good value, and rooted in and adopted by the community might be understood as local wisdom in general, according to Sartini. Research examines examines the analysis the level of the local wisdom in preserving coral reefs in Spermode Island community. Methodological aspect is quantitative coverage area survey research. Phenomenon is exposed factor. Location is Spermode Islands, South Sulawesi Province. Research time is September to November 2022. Population and sample. The sample location were determined purposive sampling. They are Barangchadi Island, Madi Island, and Botoswa Island. Sampling was done at stratified random sampling. The technique for determining the number of samples uses the Slopin formula. Precision in this study was set at 10%. The result, according to the frequency distribution at the table, up to 1% community and up to 2% community have local wisdom that falls into the very low category. In contrast, 7.5% of community have moderate local wisdom, 78.5% had like high local wisdom, and 11% had extremely high local wisdom. The typical contribution of local knowledge to protecting coral reefs figure shows the human resources feature with value of the 5.23 has the highest average value. Additionally, the conservation aspect is 2.59 and the beliefs aspect is 4.61. According to the findings analysis of local knowledge regarding the preservation of coral reefs. From each indicator, the human resources indicator is ranked extremely high, the belief indicator is ranked high, and the conservation indicator is ranked in the medium range. Local wisdom in terms of human to nature relations, human to human relations as well as trust in intra-human relations is very supportive in preserving coral reefs. Local wisdom includes knowledge of Erang Pasimumbalang for the season and fishing area, knowledge of Erang Pak Boya-Boyang for ship repair and fishing gear, the Pak Lopian knowledge of the use of wine, currents and waves, as well as natural signs in the sky, sea, and land, believe in not catching the fish around the sacred Taka-Taka, the social structure of Punggawasawi community, and the prohibition to go out to the sea on Fridays, which have an impact on the marine ecosystem. This finding supports the theory that local wisdom in a place is inseparable from the influence of various factors and influence people behavior to or towards the environment. Thank you. I give to moderator. Thank you very much. Moderator. Moderator.
Ibu Indah.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Bapak Pahri. You have much time again. 5 minutes. Nice explanation about for coral reef conservation ya. Oke. Sepertinya mungkin kita presentasi semua dulu ya Pak Taufik. Baru kita sesi tanya jawab. Ya. Oke. Next kita lanjutkan kepada presenter kedua, Bapak Muhammad Reda Ansari, Ibu Enda Mustika Pratiwi, dan Bapak Surawan. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Baik,
Ya.
terima kasih Bu.
Ya, silakan Ibu Enda ya. Ya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me in this wonderful event, International Conference and Social and Islamic Studies. It's so honorable to be part of this event. I am Enda Mustika Pratiwi, as a second author of this paper from Islamic Education Program Study. I would like to present the result of our study about perception of the hijab usage as self-control against the Korean web. Except me, this paper has first author, Mr. Muhammad Reda Ansari, and third author, Mr. Surawan, as my lecturer in IAIN Palangkaraya. So I will go on with the PowerPoint. This is our abstract. You can read by yourself. And next, this paper have three outline. First is introduction. The second is method and finding discussion. Introduction. Hijab is considered as mandatory clothing for Muslim women. Moreover, Indonesia is a country with the largest Muslim population, so the hijab is seen as a formal dress used by women with the perception that the use of hijab is a form of obedience of Allah. Mix and match clothing, among women who wear hijab is also considered a form of harmony in dress. One of the cultures that entered Indonesia was the Korean wave. The phenomenon of Korean wave that become endemic in Indonesia has led to change in the mindset and level of consumptive society, especially among teenagers. People in Indonesia have gone through many fashions that are influenced by other foreign culture before the Korean wave come in the last few years. Still in introduction, the purpose of the research is to find out how the implementation of Islamic counseling with self-control uses self-reflection to reduce K-pop addiction for teenagers, because human as a unified whole between the body and the spirit. Surawan in 2020, page 1. This research aims to determine the perception of the use of hijab as a form of self-control against the Korean wave. The method. Research method is a literature study or library research, which is a study that examines and studies various books, notes, literature, and reports that are related to the topic problem being solved. Source of the data obtained from reference, documentation, and related articles. Data collection techniques are obtained from documentation, which is derived from various documents or records such as books, journal articles, picture, or existing electronic in order to obtain various information that is in line with the object of research. Nasir, 2005. Okay, in the finding and discussion, we have 3 points about the title. First is hijab as a Muslim identity. Second is Korean wave fans' perception of hijab, and the last one from of self-control against foreign cultures. Here we go with the hijab as a Muslim identity. Hijab is a conservative dogmatic identity through an institutionalized tradition. Gonzalez acknowledged this by pointing out that Muslim women who wear the hijab are often considered to have high religiosity if on the basis of personal religious belief. In 2011, hijab emphasizes religious identity. 5 is a symbol of respect and an Islamic requirement to cover the genitals. Hardness and Islam in 2011 too. Hijab is considered as a form of piety of a Muslim woman. Because the command to use hijab contained in the Quran and Hadith, Allah say in Quran Surah Al-Ahzab 539, I will read some meaning of the ayah for you. O Prophet, say to your wives, your daughter, and the wife of the believers, let them cover their headscarves all over their bodies. That is so that they are easier to identify, so that they are not disturbed. And Allah is forgiving and most merciful. Okay, we come for the second. Korean wave fans' perception of hijab. Korean wave or Hallyu. Hallyu is from Korean word itself. When they call Korean web is they saying Hallyu in Korean. According to Jae-seong, John and Yuanto state that Hallyu is the spirit throughout the world from the world of South Korean entertainment, which is packaged in modern popular culture in the form of culinary or K-food, popular music or K-pop, animation, drama series or K-drama, games, movie to fashion. Setiana and Ajahari 2021. Korean hijab fans' perception is still here. In Indonesia itself, the sphere of the pop culture from Korean began in 2002 after the South Korean and Japan World Cup. Maybe this come with the full football, I think. And the moment which was held on an Indonesia television station where they used to introduce the South Korean drama series or K-drama. The popularity of the Korean web has an impact on the fashion world. This can be seen in the number of teenagers who are inspired to imitate the way of dressing of the idols they admire. However, the Dress culture among Korean artists and actors is inappropriate for use. This condition is of course contrary to the style of dress in Indonesia as a country with the largest Muslim community. Okay, this is some definition of perception. First, Islameto. Perception is a process related to the receive into the human brain of message or information. The second is Elizamar and Couto. Human competence to distinguish, can classify and focus the mind on something and to expose, it is called perception. The last but not least, Rahmat. Perception is an experience related to an object, phenomenon, or various relationship obtained by drawing conclusions from information and deciphering message. Okay. Basically, in Islam, there is no prohibition or inhibition on anyone to decorate with beautiful clothes to beautify themselves, protect the external beauty bestowed by Allah. Problems then arise along with the mixing of a Korean culture with Muslim women's dress style. Korean fashion trends that do not completely cover the genital of women are considered to violate the limits that have been set by Allah. Hijab is most appropriate effort to cover the genital as perfectly as possible. And fans of Korean wave perception, the hijab are as follow. First, the hijab is a veil that must be worn by Muslim women. Second, hijab and Islamic clothing can be adapted to the attributes of the Korean wife. The third, self-awareness of the role of the hijab as a true Muslim clothing. The last
Okay,
one.
1 minute.
Okay.
When-
Form of self-control against foreign cultures. Hart in Srianti argues that in an increasingly complex world, self-control is important for everyone to have. This is based on various culture and lifestyle change caused by globalization. The entry of foreign cultures today tends to be easier with the various social media supporting application. Don't be too antipathetic to foreign cultures, but don't accept them. Compromise of the value of the Korean wave need to be done so as to be able to form an integrated Muslim. Maybe that's it, our presentation. Thank you so much for your great attention. Honestly, I'm so nervous because this is my first time explain something in English. I hope you guys and everybody understand in this room. Thank you so much once again. Stay healthy and happy good day. I given to moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Enda. Next, we move the third presenter, Ibu Nadia Amalia Nasution, Vito Prasetyo, dan Ibu Siti Samhati. They are in the room. Assalamualaikum. Sepertinya tidak ada ya ibunya. Oke. We move the fourth presenter, Ibu Nurlidiawati, Bapak Pawenari, Hijang, Bapak Munsilampe, dan Bapak Yahya. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ya, Ibu Nurlidia, time is yours to present your paper about the interrogative of historical values, local culture, and element of Islamic in Ashura ritual or 10 Muharram. Okay, time is yours.
Ya, baik, terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan kepada saya. Mohon maaf, Ibu, saya barangkali menggunakan bahasa Indonesia ya, Bu ya.
Oke.
Baik. Baik, terima kasih kepada Ibu moderator yang saya hormati, Bapak Ibu yang hadir dalam forum ini. Mohon maaf sebelumnya saya menggunakan bahasa Indonesia. judul atau title yang kami ambil dalam kegiatan ini yaitu integrasi nilai-nilai historis, budaya lokal, dan unsur-unsur Islam dalam ritual Asyura atau 10 Muharram. Ya, kemudian background atau latar belakang kenapa kami mengambil judul penelitian ini karena ada beberapa hal. Yang pertama adalah fenomena di kalangan masyarakat Islam terkait dengan hari Asyura. Ini kita ketahui bukan lagi pengetahuan, sudah menjadi pengetahuan umum bahwa sebagian besar masyarakat Islam di Indonesia itu menghargai atau merayakan 10 Muharram itu sebagai hari besar umat Islam, apalagi dijadikan sebagai tahun baru umat Islam. Sehingga dalam kegiatannya itu, dalam merayakan itu berbagai macam ritual yang dilakukan oleh masyarakat, dan itu menciri khaskan masing-masing budaya lokal yang terdapat pada masyarakat itu sendiri. Kemudian yang kedua yaitu cara pandang masyarakat tentang hari Asyura atau 10 Muharram. Ada yang memandang hari Asyura itu adalah sebagai hari keagamaan. Kemudian ada juga yang memandang bahwa hari Asyura itu adalah hari yang di mana kita meningkatkan nilai-nilai budaya dan segala macam. Kemudian faktor ketiga atau latar belakang ketiga terkait dengan puasa, ada juga di antara masyarakat Islam yang memanfaatkan momen itu dengan betul-betul menjalankan ibadah puasa. Tetapi ada juga yang tidak mengutamakan puasa, yang diutamakan pada hari itu adalah kegiatan-kegiatan budaya. Ya, kemudian latar belakang selanjutnya adalah yang sangat menarik bagi penulis untuk melakukan penelitian terkait dengan ini karena banyaknya peristiwa-peristiwa penting yang terkait dengan 10 Muharram. Ya, kemudian yang kelima terdapat keunikan-keunikan ya, keunikan itu dipraktekkan masyarakat karena di dalamnya itu sangat didominasi oleh budaya-budaya lokal. Ya. Kemudian dari segi teori kami menggunakan teori daripada GIDS tentang Islam dan budaya Jawa di Indonesia. Ya, jadi GIDS membagi 3 bagian, yaitu Islam abangan yang digolongkan di dalamnya adalah petani. Kemudian yang kedua Islam santri yang di dalamnya digambarkan tentang pedagang. Kemudian yang ketiga Islam priai yang digolongkan di dalamnya adalah pegawai. Namun teori ini harus dipahami bahwa tidak semua ya masyarakat Islam di Indonesia itu mendapat pengaruh Hindu Buddha ketika Islam datang, sehingga terutama di Sulawesi Selatan mungkin Islamnya tidak seperti dengan yang digambarkan oleh GIDS tersebut. Akhirnya merasa tertarik untuk mengkaji terkait dengan teori ini. Kemudian teori lain yang dilontarkan oleh James ya, bahwa masyarakat beragama masih percaya kepada hal-hal yang di luar nalar, kemampuan mata normal, sedangkan manusia yang hidup di zaman modern sudah mulai berpikir secara logis. Nah, ini sangat berkaitan dengan penelitian kami karena menurut teori ini bahwa masyarakat modern itu seharusnya berpikir secara modern, tetapi masih banyak juga yang menggunakan pemikiran-pemikiran sebagaimana pemikiran digunakan oleh manusia-manusia primitif pada zaman dahulu. Selanjutnya rumusan masalah yang kami angkat dalam tulisan ini ada 3. Yang pertama adalah bagaimana unsur-unsur historis yang terdapat dalam ritual Asyura. Kemudian yang kedua, bagaimana unsur-unsur budaya lokal dalam ritual Asyura. Dan yang ketiga, bagaimana bentuk realitas integrasi nilai-nilai historis, budaya lokal, dan unsur-unsur Islam dalam ritual Asyura. Kemudian metode yang kami gunakan dalam penelitian ini, kan penelitian ini adalah jenis penelitian etnografi. Ya, etnografi itu adalah jenis penelitian ilmu sosial yang di dalamnya akan mengkaji masyarakat dengan kebudayaan-kebudayaan itu sendiri. Kemudian sumber data yang kami dapatkan, karena ini adalah kualitatif, maka sumber datanya ada 2, yaitu primer dan sekunder. Ya, primer itu didapatkan dari informan-informan yang terkait dengan penelitian ini. Kemudian sekunder itu kami dapatkan dari buku-buku maupun jurnal dan sumber-sumber tertulis lainnya. Ya, kemudian prosedur pengumpulan data, sekali lagi karena ini adalah kualitatif, maka ada 3 cara untuk mengumpulkan data, yaitu observasi, wawancara, dan dokumentasi. Selanjutnya hasil penelitian yang kami dapatkan di lapangan atau riset misal, yaitu unsur-unsur historis yang terdapat di dalam ritual ini. Kebanyakan masyarakat juga menganggap bahwa ini adalah ritual keagamaan, namun di dalamnya sangat didominasi oleh nilai-nilai historis. Misalnya, ya masyarakat masih mengingat apa-apa peristiwa yang penting yang terjadi di masa lampau yang sangat berkaitan dengan 10 Asyura. Contoh misalnya peristiwa Karbala, itu sangat erat kaitannya, terutama mohon maaf ya, orang-orang Syiah sangat menghargai ritual ini karena kenapa peristiwa Karbala itu sangat menjadi bagian yang penting dalam kehidupan mereka. Kemudian yang kedua, unsur-unsur budaya lokal yang terintegrasi dalam Asyura, itu kami melihat di masyarakat ketika pelaksanaan hari Asyura, mereka menggunakan bahan-bahan yang betul-betul hanya berada pada daerah tertentu, yang tidak ada dijual di mall, tidak ada dijual di pasar nasional dan segala macam. Makanya itu bisa kami masukkan sebagai unsur-unsur lokal. Ya. Kemudian ketiga, bentuk integrasi nilai historis budaya lokal dan unsur-unsur Islam dalam ritual Asyura itu, terutama pada bacaan-bacaan. Ya, ketika orang Islam berdoa pasti membaca ayat-ayat dalam Al-Quran, dan yang tidak terlupakan adalah Al-Fatihah. Nah, selain itu mereka juga membaca, meminta sesuatu dengan menggunakan bahasa lokal, ya, bahasa lokal untuk menyempurnakan doa-doa yang berbahasa Arab itu. Kemudian selain itu mereka juga menyalakan api-api dupa. Api dupa itu dianggap sangat penting dan wajib diadakan pada ritual ini, karena mengapa? Asap yang dikeluarkan api dupa itu dipercaya atau diyakini untuk mengantarkan doanya kepada leluhur-leluhurnya. Dan makanya kami menyimpulkan bahwa itu adalah bentuk integrasi dari ketiga unsur tersebut. Kesimpulan, ya, jadi ada 3 pertanyaan dan berarti ada 3 kesimpulan. Jadi sesungguhnya ritual Asyura pertama kali dilakukan sebagai bentuk usaha untuk mencegah atau menolak balak yang sewaktu-waktu mengancam keselamatan jiwa bagi masyarakat Patarasan. Jadi wilayah yang kami ambil sebagai lokasi penelitian itu wilayah Patarasan, dekat dari kampus. Karena kenapa? Karena masyarakatnya ini sangat intens ya. Ini merupakan kegiatan tahunan dan wajib bagi mereka untuk menjalankannya. Tetapi mereka sangat berbeda dengan masyarakat-masyarakat lainnya. Konon katanya pertama kali diadakan ritual ini ketika itu terjadi suatu musibah, ya, yang menimpa masyarakat lokal Patalasang, sehingga salah satu cara untuk mencegah dan menghindari peristiwa itu adalah dengan melakukan ritual Asyura pada hari 10 Muharram. Kemudian yang kedua, ya, unsur-unsur lokalnya terletak pada bahan-bahan yang digunakan dan simbol-simbol yang diberi makna berdasarkan keyakinan. Misalnya bubur, mereka membuat 2 jenis bubur merah dan bubur putih. Yang merah itu menandakan bahwa akan tentang kebaikan, sementara yang putih tidak ada rasa, itu disimbolkan dengan nilai-nilai yang tidak bagus atau perbuatan-perbuatan yang kurang bagus. Kemudian yang ketiga, doa-doa yang dibaca adalah ayat-ayat yang terdapat dalam Al-Quran, namun diiringi dan dilengkapi dengan bahasa-bahasa lokal, ditambah dengan api dupa dan temannya yang diyakini untuk mengantarkan doanya kepada leluhurnya. Sekian dan terima kasih dari kami. Terima kasih kepada semuanya. Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Oke, makasih Ibu Nur Lidiawati. Nice explanation ya about 10 Muharram. Okay, for participant, if there's something question or suggestion, just for saving. Okay, next we move the next presenter. Bapak Samsir. Bapak
Ya.
Muhammad Tang, Bapak Ansar dan Tasrifin Tahara, with title Islamic Religious Influence on the Culture of Irau Kutai Kartanegara. Oke, time is your Bapak.
Ya.
Pak Samsul Nur.
Ya, terima kasih Bu.
Ya.
Saya juga mohon maaf, saya juga menggunakan bahasa Indonesia Bu ya.
Ya.
Share screen-nya ya.
Iya.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan kepada saya. Pada hari ini saya akan menyampaikan tentang judul kami Islamic Religion Influence on the Culture of Irau Kutai Kartanegara. Sebelum kita memahami tentang Kutai Kartanegara, perlu kita ketahui bahwa di Kutai itu ada dua kerajaan. Ya. Yang pertama adalah Kerajaan Kutai Mulawarman, yang kedua ada Kerajaan Kutai Kartanegara. Kita ketahui bahwa kerajaan tertua ini adalah Kerajaan Mulawarman yang merupakan kerajaan Hindu tertua. Itu muncul pada abad ke-4 Masehi, sekitar sekitar tahun 300 Masehi. Kemudian awal dari kerajaan ini adalah dari cucu dari Kerajaan Kudungga, kemudian melahirkan anak yang bernama Aswarman. Kemudian Aswarman melahirkan 3 anak yang bernama Mulawarman. Inilah dideklarasikan 3 raja ini. Pertama di Kutai yang dikenal dengan Raja Mulawarman, itu ada anak Aswarman, kemudian ada Purnawarman di Jawa Barat, kemudian ada Jayawarman di sekitar Kamboja. Itulah asal usul dari kerajaan tertua yang ada di Kutai Kartanegara dan ada di Kutai. Kemudian pada tahun 1300 muncul dengan namanya Kerajaan Kutai Kartanegara. Ya, ini Kerajaan Kutai Kartanegara adalah bahwa awalnya juga bercorak agama Hindu, itu sampai pada raja yang ke-6 baru Islam masuk. Jadi raja yang pertama ini adalah Maharaja Dewa Sakti, kemudian Raja Padukanara yang raja kedua, kemudian Maharaja Sultan ada raja yang ketiga, kemudian Mandarsa ada raja keempat, kelima adalah Tumenggung Bayaba, kemudian raja yang keenam adalah Putra Mahkota. Ya, Raja Mahkota Mulia, itulah yang menerima Islam yang pertama. Jadi sehingga kita ketahui bahwa kehadiran Islam pada masyarakat Kutai Kartanegara dapat dilihat dari aspek sosial budaya, ditandai dengan perubahan konseptual tentang hubungan dan stratifikasi sosial. Islam telah memperkenalkan persamaan hak. Jadi Islam masuk di Kutai Kartanegara ini itu pada abad 17, ya pada abad 17 itu dibawa oleh yang dikenal dengan 2 datu, ya, setelah mengislamkan Raja Makassar yaitu Raja Alauddin, Sultan Alauddin, kemudian dia ke Kutai Kartanegara untuk mengislamkan Raja Mahkota Mulia pada saat itu, ya, sehingga diterima walaupun pada saat itu diislamkan itu melalui dengan adu kesaktian. Ya, adu kesaktian ini ya sehingga pada saat itu mulailah terjadi adu kesaktian, kemudian tetap dimenangkan oleh datu yang dikenal dengan Tuan-Tuan Pangrangan. Inilah dimenangkan oleh ulama yang dikenal Datu Ditoro. Ya, karena kita tahu bahwa 2 datu ini yang berada di Kutai, informasi yang kita ketahui bahwa Datu Ditiro yang tinggal di Kutai, ya, sementara Datu Ribandang kembali ke Makassar. Kenapa? Karena Datu Ribandang ini mendengar informasi bahwa orang-orang yang ada di Makassar itu kembali ke agama semula, ya, sehingga Datu Ribandang kembali ke Makassar itu, sementara Datu Ditiro ini Inilah yang diklaim sebagai Tuan Tunggang Parangan yang ada di Kutai Kartanegara. Konon informasinya bahwa Datuk Ditoro ini ada makamnya yang ada di Bulukumba, ya, di Bulukumba. Kemudian Datuk Ditiro juga ada di Kutai Kartanegara, khususnya di Kutai Lama. Kemudian hal ini yang berbeda dengan masyarakat pra-Islam, walaupun kenyataannya sikap ekualis tersebut tidak sepenuhnya berlaku dalam praktek kehidupan masyarakat Kutai. Suatu kenyataan yang dapat disaksikan dalam berbagai upacara lingkungan hidup atau pada kegiatan upacara erau musik masih merupakan kelanjutan tradisi pra-Islam. Ya, sampai sekarang walaupun mayoritas Islam, karena di Kalimantan ini ada dua suku yang kita kenal, yaitu suku Dayak dengan suku Kutai. Tapi suku Kutai itu mayoritas umat Islam, ya boleh dikatakan 100% ya, penduduk Islam, khususnya suku Kutai yang memeluk agama Islam. Kemudian bagaimana pengaruh Islam terhadap budaya erau? Ya, kita melihat bahwa pengaruhnya yang sangat luar biasa. Ya, begitu Islam sudah banyak memeluk orang-orang Kutai, ya, orang Kutai, karena suku yang kedua adalah suku Dayak sebenarnya, Bu. Dayak ini adalah mayoritas non-Muslim, bahkan masih ada yang masih primitif, ya, masih belum punya agama, yang dikenal dengan animisme, ya, animisme. Tapi kalau Dayak ya sudah banyak juga yang masuk Islam, itu pun melalui dengan cara kawin mawin, ya. Kemudian bagaimana pengaruh Islam terhadap budaya erau? Ya, di sini ada unsur kesenian. Ya, kita tahu bahwa nilai seni adalah nilai yang universal. Ia dapat menyentuh hampir seluruh sudut kehidupan manusia. Keindahan yang ada di dunia ini pada hakikatnya adalah pertanda kekuasaan Allah yang Maha Indah. Ya, dalam hadis juga dikatakan bahwa Tuhan itu memiliki suatu menyukai suatu keindahan, ya. Itu dalam hadis dikatakan. Dengan adanya pesta budaya erau yang dilestarikan setiap tahun diharapkan oleh masyarakat Kutai, sehingga budaya-budaya baik budaya pesisir maupun budaya pedalaman kembali digelar dan diperagakan untuk menyegarkan ilmu pengetahuan. Next. Kemudian seni budaya Islami yang sering ditampilkan pada acara seremonial ini, yaitu pada pelaksanaan erau. Kalau erau ini kan diupacarakan itu setiap tahun, Bu. Ya, selama ini 3 kali sudah tidak melaksanakan secara besar-besaran karena terkait dengan COVID-19, jadi tidak melakukan upacara erau, tapi tetap mengadakan hanya merupakan suatu ziarah ke makam-makam. Ya, artinya tidak terlaksana, artinya tidak secara besar-besaran. Kemudian kita melihat bahwa seni budaya Islami yang ditampilkan secara seremonial pada acara erau, yang pertama seni suara. Ya, di sini hadra, ini sangat berpengaruh sekali. Hadra ini adalah merupakan suatu seni yang mengungkapkan suatu syair-syair, ya, dengan dilakukan dengan melakukan suatu alat musik yang berupa rebana atau alat musik terbang. Inilah yang dilakukan oleh orang-orang yang ada yang sering melakukan itu masalah kesenian hadra. Kemudian kasidah, ya, kasidah juga ini juga dilakukan oleh ini karena sudah bisa diterima oleh pihak keraton untuk kesenian ini berupa kasidah modern yang ada di Kutai. Nah, ini sudah bisa masuk di keraton. Kemudian salah satu juga seni, yaitu pembacaan Marsanji. Ini pembacaan Marsanji juga dilakukan oleh orang-orang Kutai, di mana ini merupakan suatu pembinaan lewat dengan LPKK, Lembaga Pembinaan Kebudayaan Kutai Kartanegara. Ini Marsanji ini juga merupakan suatu ungkapan syair, ya, yang dilakukan oleh para pembaca ini, ya, ada diiringi dengan musik. Kemudian yang terakhir adalah musik. Ya, musik ini ada musik tingkilan. Tingkilan ini ada kolaborasi, ya, kolaborasi antara 3 suku yang ada di situ, baik suku Melayu maupun suku Jawa dan suku Bugis, ya, karena di sini banyak pendatang, Bu, ya, banyak juga orang Bugis, Jawa, apalagi yang paling banyak penduduknya adalah Jawa, kemudian kedua Bugis, yang ketiga mungkin Banjar, ya, malah orang-orang pribumi yang keempat barangkali penduduknya dibanding dengan orang pendatang. Jadi ini
Sampai Bapak 2
kolaborasi
menit lagi.
Ya, 2 menit lagi, ya.
Iya.
Ya. Kemudian seni sastra, ya, seni sastra ini adalah merupakan suatu sastra yang diungkapkan dengan lemah lembut, dengan mengungkapkan suatu muatan-muatan sastranya. Kemudian busana masalah pakaian ini, ya, di sini juga menjadi kolaborasi dengan pakaian. Ya, di sini ada pakaian Cina, ya, ini yang sering ditampilkan pada budaya Erau. Ada busana Bugis, busana Melayu, dan sebagainya. Ya, kemudian juga ada seni tari. Tari Jepang juga ini adalah salah satu sangat berpengaruh di khususnya budaya pesisir yang dilakukan oleh orang-orang Kutai yang ada di sini. Kemudian kalau pelaksanaan upacara Eraunya yang secara sakral, ada di sini ada Menjamu Banua, ada Tempon Tawar, ada mengulur naga dan melimbur. Ya, menjauh Banua ini adalah pertanda bahwa menginformasikan kepada seluruh rakyatnya untuk untuk mengadakan Erau, ya, Erau, upacara Erau. Kemudian Tempon Tawar ini adalah salah satu pertanda bahwa mendirikan suatu ayu. Artinya ayu ini bahwa Erau sudah dilakukan untuk sudah dimulai. Kemudian mengurut naga ini atau berlembur, inilah acara yang terakhir bahwa orang-orang Kutai, ya, melakukan suatu penceburan naga, itu dibawa ke daerah pusat yaitu Kutai Lama. Nah, di sanalah mengambil suatu air suci untuk dibawa ke keraton kembali. Ya. Kemudian terakhir masalah peranakan sosial, ya, perlu kita ketahui bahwa masyarakat yang ada di Kutai itu ada strata sosial, masalah kasta itu ada 3 lapisan, yaitu masyarakat orang bangsawan, ya, itu yang digelar dengan Aji. Kemudian ada masyarakat tengah yang dikenal dengan Enci atau Awang. Kemudian, ya, yang terakhir adalah masyarakat biasa. Kemudian secara politik, ini politik juga Sultan, karena ini sudah masuk Sultan, ya. Sultan dia mampu untuk menemani seorang ulama ketika dia menghadapi seorang Muslim, dalam menghadapi seorang non-Muslim. Ya, inilah yang adalah salah satu memperkuat diri daripada untuk melakukan suatu sistem politiknya. Kemudian secara ekonomi dan perdagangan, bahwa masyarakat Kutai juga sangat memperhatikan dan mempeduli dengan rakyatnya sendiri, bagaimana dia bisa untuk hidup dengan makmur dan sebagainya. Itu atas dukungan dari masyarakat itu untuk melakukan suatu perekonomian dalam melakukan suatu perdagangan. Mungkin itu saja, Bu, yang saya sampaikan. Thank you.
Oke, makasih
Saya
Bapak.
kembalikan kepada moderator.
Ya, makasih Pak Samsil.
Ya.
Okay, now we move to the sixth presenter, Ibu Sistia Dinita, ada Ibu? Assalamualaikum Ibu.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Iya. Oke. Silakan Ibu dengan judul Tracing Gender Perspective in Literature, The Search for Islamic Feminists, It Fight and the City by Hanum Rais. Oke. Ya. Novel ya, Bu. Oke. Bu.
Okay, since my paper was in English, so I would like to present in English.
Oke.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So today I would like to present my paper, Tracing Gender Perspectives in Literature, Research for Islamic Feminism in Faith and the City by Hanum Rais. And yes, this is an Indonesian novel written by Islamic women author, collaborated with her husband, Rangga Almahendra. So Hanum Rais, who is the daughter of Amin Rais, yes, as we know. So for the research background, I took in Islamic feminism as the topic because we know that there are a lot of feminist movements have been presenting in the Western countries. We know liberal feminism, Marxist, psychoanalytic, existential feminism, and multicultural feminism. And there is also the existence of feminism within Islam, and we know it as Islamic feminism. So these feminist thought and movement have also influenced Muslim intellectuals by using the interpretation of the Hadith and the Quran to dismantle the sources of women's problems and question the causes of the emergence of male domination. Among the intellectuals include Rifat Hassan from Pakistan, Margot Badran from USA, Fatima from Egypt, Amina Wadud, one of the famous ones who also wrote the book entitled Quran and Women, by which she tried to interpret the Quran and Hadith, which based on the the glasses through the lens of the woman. And the last from Indonesia, we also have Siti Zuhayatin. In Indonesian context, Muslims were also feminists must make the Quran and Hadith a source of reference in the discussions regarding that Islam is our religion, our majority religion, and it is highly difficult to promote gender equality when feminism fails to understand Islamic paradigms, norms, and values in Indonesia. So I focus more on the theory from Margot Badran in my paper because she wrote an article entitled Between Secular and Islamic Feminism, Reflections on the Middle East and Beyond. She discussed about the difference between secular feminism and Islamic feminism in Middle East, as well as the intersection of those two types of feminism. According to her, Islamic feminism was emerged due to several contributing factors, and the need of women to send a progressive Islamic voice, the need of all citizens, both men and women, to actively participate in public spaces, and the fact that education has reached more women and made them well equipped with current knowledge. So my studied material is Faith and the City, which is a novel by Hanum Rais. So Hanum Rais is a female author. She likes to write novel, collaborated with her husband because her husband is also, an intelligent man who is interested in writing, but not as good as her. So their works also depict the ups and downs of married couple in dealing with dilemmatic life choices, problematic society toward stereotyping of Islam with intriguing Islamic philosophy and perspectives. So some of the some of their novels have been adapted to movies like Bulan Terbelah di Langit Amerika and 99 Cahaya di Langit Eropa. And this novel that I use as my study material is Fate and the City, which is the novel set in United States around the tragedy of 9/11 when the attack of the Twin Towers occurred. Actually, this novel has been adapted to movie as well, entitled Hanum and Rangga. So for the research method, I use descriptive qualitative theme by doing a close reading. I try to look for the stereotyping of male and female Muslims in the story and the women's struggle following the Islamic values. By doing a sociological approach and studying the theory of Margot Badran about Islamic feminism, the study will go through several steps, which are identifying the gender identity, gender roles, and their stereotyping of male and female characters. So these are some terminology which we know: gender perspectives, gender roles, gender identity, and gender stereotypes. So the findings, for the findings that I have here, the first, for the gender roles, Hanum as a wife, there is the phrase, "My family must come first," seems to be an energy for Hanum to cut his dream like his idealized presenter. So in here, Hanum was told that she wanted to become a reputable journalist or reputable presenter, just like Andy Cooper, who was taught as an American, and but he had to cut off she had to cut off her dream because she has got married, and then she was afraid that by pursuing her dream, she failed to fulfill her obligation to be a good wife for her husband. And then I took one of the references from Hadith, from Ibnu Majah, narrated that when Mu'ad came from Syria, he prostrated to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and said, "What is this, O Muhammad?" He said, "O Mu'ad, I went to Syria and saw them prostrating to their bishops and patriarchs, and I wanted to do that for you." And then Nabi Muhammad SAW said, "Do not do that. If I were to command anyone to prostrate to anyone other than Allah, I would have commanded women to prostrate to their husbands. So by the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, no woman can fulfill her duty towards Allah until she fulfills her duty toward her husband. So if he asks her for intimacy, even if she's on her camel saddle, she should not refuse." And then for Rangga, which is as a husband, really Rangga doesn't have any other ammunition to convince his wife to join him on the arc of life in Europe. Apart from being devoted to his husband, the reward is heaven. So in the story, Rangga has to ask his wife to follow him to pursue his doctorate degree. In that case, Hanum had to go to European countries and accompanied her husband. And then actually at the first time, Hanum didn't want to accept that because she had her own career in Indonesia, but she had to follow because she realized that there is the verse, or like there's the reference from Hadith as well, saying that if a woman prays her daily prayers, fast in Ramadan month, guards her chastity, and obeys her husband, it will be said to her, "You can enter paradise from whichever of the gates of paradise you wish." So basically referring to this Hadith, so Hanum followed her husband to go to European countries, which is to Vienna. And
Oke, Ibu, 2 minutes left. 2
Okay.
menit lagi.
thank you. So I will just skip to the conclusions.
Yep.
Based on the findings and discussion that I have here, I can say that both characters do not typically adhere to their gender roles, identity, and stereotypes. Hanum, as the female character, adheres to her gender roles and gender identity as a pious woman and obedient wife. However, all the negative stereotypes were only addressed to Hanum as both woman and a wife. Being represented as a strong and intelligent woman wearing hijab to show her Islamic identity, Hanum successfully broke the stereotype and struggled for her voice without leaving her Islamic values. As opposed, Rangga, being represented as an affectionate man and a loyal husband, he failed to adhere to his roles due to his tremendous love for his wife, yet he still holds a strong identity as a husband. So he was both submissive and democratic at times, especially when it comes to decision making regarding his wife's fashion and temporary pleasure. Thank you so much. That is all for my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Bu Sistiani Nita. Nice explanation about the novel from the Hanum Rais, ya. Okay, next we move to the last presenter, Bapak Taufik. Oke, silakan Bapak beserta partner Mutmainah, Ibu Hijrana, dan Ibu Irawati.
Okay, thank you, Bu Indah,
Iya,
for having me the opportunity to present our presentation. Allow me to share the screen.
Yep.
Tidak bertentangan dengan pendapat hukum dan syarat jual beli, pendapat pada sistem perjanjian akad yang sah dan diputus. Hal ini dapat dibuktikan dengan mengandalkan analisis terhadap.
Can you see our screen?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Today is wonderful, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm with my students. Mutmainah is here, Hijrana, and also Irawati. And we came here with the paper entitled Identifying Fake News, the Importance of Digital Literacy. I'm Taufik Madhar. I'm a lecturer in Universitas Islam Negeri Alauddin Makassar, Faculty of Adab and Humanities, Department of Library Science. And my expertise is in digital literacy, information literacy. And Mutmainah is my supervised student. Hijrana is and Irawati is they are librarian. So we came together to discuss about fake news. Sometimes we call it hoax. Okay. Okay, our slide only fill a couple of slides, and there's contents here, background of study, methods, result, and discussion, and we come out to the conclusion. Okay, fake news. I wonder, especially in the current situation in our country, Indonesia. 1 year before the presidential election, there are many fake news broadcasts spread in our social media like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and this we call it in post-truth era. Post-truth era means we are difficult to identify which the right information or this is misinformation. So we came to the definition fake news. I copy this from Wikipedia. I think there are many of us know Wikipedia is the like a bigger dictionary. Fake news is false or misleading information presented as news. Fake news often has the aim of damaging the reputation of a person or entity. And we can see in the current day, many reputation of person run down, because of fake news. Now, fake news is around us in many aspects of life, in business, in industry, education, and especially in our objective of study in the political issue. And even making money through advertising revenue. Some people, some person, they have ability to create fake news just to make money through advertising. So there's an author, a good journalist,
Yep.
Clary Wardle. She said that fake news is complicated, and I think we all agree here. Fake news is really complicated, especially ours in Indonesia. We are in democratization country. We have ideology democracy. Everybody, everyone in this country allowed to speak up, but sometimes ethically, that's the problem. And in political contests, and this is our objective of the study. I figure out some in the previous presidential election. There are many fake news that you can easily find through the internet. For example, as you can notice in my slide, there is permainan politik era digital itu bernama hoax. This is the tagline of some newspaper I found in media. Ini yang harus dilakukan untuk hajar hoax and fake news. The problem is, do we need to combat fake news? I don't think so, because when we combat one, then another come fake news. If we combat fake news, hoax makin merajalela jelang pemilu. 10 hoax atau fake news politik yang paling kondang di media sosial. Even some journalists categorize or list them kind of fake news or hoax. And our method, actually this research is we haven't done yet this research. This research is my previous research, and now we are trying to develop it by taking only in political issue. And the method is we are gonna search as many as we can fake news that has been ever published in media, either in a blog, in a newspaper, local, national. So we limit it in local or national media. And then after that, we analyze the content, categorize them, particularly about only the political issue, especially this 1 year before our presidential election this coming year. I think, fake news is already prepared for any party in our country that we call influencer. And this morning, I tried to search in Google berita bohong seputar politik di Indonesia, and it hits about more than 23 million lists. I think that's one, and I think this number will grow up a day, a minute, an hour later, it will be grow up. And okay, I quickly come to the result and discussion. And see, this is my previous findings from my previous finding from our study. Hoax jelang pilpres meningkat, berdebarnya kebanyakan kaum ibu, housewife, housewife, especially housewife. We also did a research a year ago, but not in political issue. Our objective in the nakes, help workers, and many Makassaris, they cannot understand misinformation. But this one we consider about a political issue, and I found some. This is from my previous study. One fake news can result many comments, many comments, many commentary from even academician get inside engage academician from as you can see here some example. Orang sebelah katanya kan sudah stres semua. This I told you, if we don't have digital literacy, or in other words, illiterate person, then we can be fooled by fake news creators. And to understand the current information ecosystem, I quote Clyde Wardle, we can identify the type of contents, motivation, and ways of how this fake news is disseminated. Okay, this is type of mis or disinformation. There is satire or parody. People like just fun. They create fake news and then broadcast it through social media. Misleading content, imposter content, fabricated content, and this many we can easily many fabricated content nowadays. False connection, false context. Also, this one the category that we can easily find through the internet, and manipulated content. And this is the way how clear that I quote previous satire or parody, false connection, and our objective of study is in the political influence. There are 4 ticks there. Misleading content, yes, we easily find nowadays in media. False context also, manipulated content, and also, as I mentioned, fabricated content. And especially in dissemination, some of it is being shared unwittingly by people on social media. Yes, we have our own social media. I'm sure Bu Indah have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and maybe more than one account, and retweet without checking. Some it's being amplified by journalists. Sometimes when somebody amplified this is sometimes they use in industrial, in business. They amplify the content just to make sure they get money. But sometimes we use it also in political side by journalists who are now under more pressure than ever to try make sense and accurately report information emerging on the social web in real time, of course. The flow of dissemination, adopted information from public opinion. Yes, from public opinion ya, biasanya dari opini publik ini yang biasa istilahnya kita digoreng ya. Being burned by someone, fake news creators, which is then developed into article, season make it false sentences, then spread through our social media application, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. And then we came up to the conclusion, this is, digital information, digital literacy, it's really really important. Information is powerful because when people have knowledge, they can find solution without having to help out. But it is how we use it that that will define us. Information is powerful. I agree with this. Information is powerful, but it is how we use it that will define us. And the last slide, fake news is met with a slick narrative and convince anybody, especially those illiterate people. Those illiterate people may be fooled. Indonesia really digital literacy, so we can have really democration, real democration. And then thank you very much for giving my time.
Okay, thank you Pak Taufik Mata. Okay. Okay. After hearing you all presentation, the presentation all very interesting. There are coral reef from Bapak Fahri Reza, perception hijab from Miss Enda. Next, Ibu Nurlidiawati about the 10 Muharram, and Bapak Samsir about influence Islamic religion of Irau Kutai Kartanegara. Ibu Sistiadinita about the Hanum Rais novels, and the last Bapak Taufik about the fake news. Okay. Next we move the next
Sorry to
section.
interrupt,
Yep.
Miss Indah.
Oh, ada. Bapak
Okay.
siapa?
My
Tabe,
name
maaf.
is Vito Frastia. The first author is Nadia Amalia Nasution.
Oh, oke, maaf Bapak.
Okay.
Ya, makasih.
Okay, thank you,
Iya,
Miss Indah.
Okay, before we move to the next section, question and answer, I invite the third speaker from Bapak Vito Prasetyo ya. Ya, Bapak Vito? Bukan ya? Bapak siapa? Nadia Amalia Nasution, Vito Prasetyo, dan Siti Samhati. Iya, itu. Tabe. Your voice, Bapak Vito.
Oh, Oke.
Oke.
Okay.
Ya.
Still mute. Okay.
Oke, silakan Bapak. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Indah Fadilah.
Yep.
Let me. Do I have a permit to share screen, Miss
Yep.
Indah?
Oke, silakan.
Okay. Wait a second. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning to all presenters, to all participants in this occasion, Second International Conference on Social and Islamic Studies. Okay. Okay, in this article or writing, we concern about radicalism in Indonesia. Yeah. So, since I live in Bandar Lampung, we try to discuss about the local wisdom in Bandar Lampung itself, so-called PL Pesinggiri. Yeah. So the title is The Role of Local Wisdom, PL Pesinggiri in Deradicalization Effort. As we know that in Bandar Lampung itself there is many casualties about the radicalism. In 2022, there is about 8 or 7 terrorism caught by police in Bandar Lampung, yeah, in Lampung province. Sorry. Okay, so we take sure about the radicalization. Okay, we first we want to introduction about the article. So from year to year, the government has consistently promoted attention and mitigation effort. As we know that government, central government, the central government really have a concern about radicalism. Yeah, they made regulation about radicalism itself. Some minister made regulation to their ministry. Yeah. For example, SKB, surat keputusan bersama. Coaching increase security to promoting religious moderation programs to minimize acts of radicalism because they are considered to disturb public peace. Yeah. Since WTC terror, there is what is it called? Some negative image with Islam, yeah. In Indonesia itself, there is started terrorism from Bali bombing in Bali in 2000, maybe 2002, 2003.
Excuse me.
Ya.
Bapak Pito, share screen-nya nggak muncul.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Maybe we close first.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it show up, Miss Ina?
Yep.
Okay.
I can see.
Okay. Maybe we can use the slideshow presentation, yeah. So, okay. So this government measures should be successful, but there is still much discussion about radicalism in Indonesia. This means that the government steps still need to be supported by other things that have the potential to support government programs. Everyone know that every place in this Indonesia have a local wisdom, right? For example, in Provinsi Lampung, there is a local wisdom called Pil Pesinggiri. Maybe in Sulawesi, there is a local wisdom too. Maybe in every place in Sulawesi, maybe in Makassar or Manado or Palu, they have specific characteristic local wisdom. So we try to approach how to approach the society to minimize the mindset about radicalism. So I think, and we think this approach can be done with the police or with the government in pemerintah daerah gitu ya. Okay, the formula tried to be written in this article is to explore the local wisdom approach as one of the efforts that can be done toward the changes of radicalism while supporting the radicalism movement. Okay, this research aims to analyze the local wisdom of Lampung culture, namely Pil Pesinggiri, by focusing on the de-radicalism movement pursued by Islamic preaching. So we combine the dakwah in Islam with the local wisdom. So we, as we know that there is a tegangan ya, contradiction about religion and culture ya. But we think that it can be saling melengkapi. It can be saling melengkapi lah. Jadi so we can use the approach for local wisdom to syiar in every place in this country. Okay, the theory itself, we use the first is local wisdom itself, and then the second is Pil Pesinggiri. Pil Pesinggiri consists of Juluk Adok, Nemui Nyimah, Nengah Nyapur, and Sakai Sambayan. And the third, we use the theory about syiar ya, dakwah messages in our culture, and then the fourth is de-radicalization. Okay, maybe we discuss about the Pil Pesinggiri first, yeah. So the Pil Pesinggiri consists of four elements of four components. There is the first is Bejuluk Adok. Bejuluk Adok means value of exemplary religiosity, morality, and intellectualities. So maybe in as we know that Ustad or Dai in our society have a different position from common citizen. Maybe in communication we call it opinion leader. So once they spoke, the citizen will be listening, not just hearing but listening and doing. In Islam we call it sami'na wa ata'na, ya. Okay, so so dakwah approach in Islam both bil lisan and bil hal. And bil lisan and bil hal we can be combined with local wisdom. So bejuluk adok means we give a predicate for the citizen. For example, if the citizen have a achievement, or so we for example we get that a predicate, yeah. For example, in Nabi Muhammad gave in Arab society, they give the Nabi Muhammad Al-Amin predicate, yeah. So it is much similar than in Arab culture. Okay, the second is Nemui Nyimah. Yeah. Nemui Nyimah means values of equality and togetherness. This value raise the importance of intimacy and harmony based on religious values. It is concretized through the obligation to establish silaturahmi, ultimately leading to the value of social care or sociality and not harming others. In Pil Pesinggirin, Nemui Nyimah means silaturahmi. In terms of radicalization, there is three characteristic. The one is exclusive. Yeah. Exclusive means they do not want to discuss this. They do not want to do a dialogue with the others, because they mindset about maybe about the ISIS, maybe about the ISIS is the one and only mindset that or value that that the truth, ya, yang satu-satunya benar gitu. Jadi tidak ada dialog, tidak ada diskusi di situ. So Nemui Nyimah means we come together, we sit together, and then we discuss about the issue that happen in our society recently. Yeah. So Nemui Nyimah means that. So this is the approach about the radicalization in radicalism.
Excuse me, Bapak Vito.
Okay.
3 minutes left.
Okay.
3 menit lagi.
Yeah. Okay, 3 minutes. The radicalization is acceptance of culture and new things is able to close the significant gap that has been the beginning of the radicalism to grow. The third is nengah nyapur, meaning sociable or social. As we know that one of characteristic radicalism is exclusive, and then they intolerant. So intolerant means they do not want to get along with society. They live in a different point of view, and then as I talked earlier, there is they do not want to discuss. Having an attitude of tolerance, being open to listening to the advice of others, and upholding consensus. The radicalism, half-hearted knowledge, lack of tolerance, and lack of openness are the beginning of the seeds of radicalism to grow. This is where the role of nengah nyapur values contributes significantly. So maybe in Makassar there is local wisdom that have the same meaning, but the sama maknanya tapi mungkin dengan with the different terms, ya. Okay. And then the last is Sakai Sambayan, meaning attitude of generosity and cooperation in doing something among others by talking turns. In the radicalism, they have maybe we can implementing of dakwah activities requiring cooperation between communities. This kind of social environment is considered capable of making the values of radicalism brought by a handful of people less likely to develop. When there are seeds of radicalism, the community will look after each other and remember and look after each other. So this is conclusion. So this is an approach to maximize the radicalization effort to minimize the seeds of the radicalism. In conclusion, the description above shows that the personality and character of the Lampung people reflected in Pil Pesinggiri are considered quite ideal in the deradicalization movement beside the Pil Pesinggiri. It aims to achieve harmony by creating harmonious, peaceful, and dynamic life patterns by capitalizing on this culture and customs. The predecessors of the Lampung people have been able to hack the other of harmonious and peaceful community life. Ideally, this success can be parameter for current and future generation to recreate dialogue about the values of local wisdom into the reality of diversity, especially those that intersect with their radicalization efforts. So we live in tagline Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, right? So we must respect to the other difference in our country. Thank you very much for the time, Miss Indah Fadila.
Oke, thank you Bapak Vito Prasetya. Oke, next agenda is discussion. Because I see in the chat meeting there are 3 questions. So I didn't open the question more because we have the limited time. Oke. Jadi kita tidak buka ini ya pertanyaan, kita jawab dulu yang ada di chat meeting. After that, if there are any time, kita buka lagi. Oke. In the chat meeting, I see there are 3 questions. From the first, ditujukan kepada Ibu Maulidia dan Pak Mr. Taufik ya. Ada 2 ini Pak Mr. Taufik. Ya. Yang pertama, the first I invite Ibu Maulidia to answer. Halo, Assalamualaikum Ibu. Ya, Nur Lidia Wati. Ya. Halo.
Halo. Ya.
Ya, sorry. Ini Bu, ada pertanyaan dari Bapak Fahri yang menanyakan what is the strategy to increase public knowledge of Ashura to that celebrate of eating forage, bunga bucket, and apa ini satu? Apa ini yang satu? Oke, Ibu bisa baca di ini drying mattresses. Bagaimana cara Ibu meningkatkan pengetahuan tentang 10 Muharram terkait dengan perayaan yang Ibu katakan tadi tentang makan bubur yang Ibu tadi sampaikan, terus bunga karangan bunga dan lain-lainnya. Ya. Ibu bisa dapat ininya? Intinya.
Bahasa Indonesia saja ya, Ibu.
Iya, silahkan Ibu.
Ya, baik, terima kasih atas pertanyaannya terkait dengan 10 Muharram. Terutama ya sangat identik dengan pembuatan bubur ya. Itu berbeda-beda caranya masyarakat untuk membuat bubur. Ada yang 7 macam, ada juga yang 2 macam. Kebetulan yang kemarin kami teliti di Pakalasa itu mereka membuat hanya 2 macam, yaitu warna putih dan warna merah. Nah, warna putih ini disimbolkan dengan hal-hal yang negatif, bisa menghindarkan mereka dari dari hal-hal yang negatif, misalnya pengaruh pengaruh ilmu-ilmu hitam dan segala macam. Sementara yang warna merah itu kan menggunakan bahan dasarnya adalah beras dan gula merah, kemudian kelapa. Itu disimbolkan dengan kehidupan yang lebih baik. Nah, kalau bertanya terkait dengan bagaimana strategi untuk memperluas pengetahuan terkait dengan ini, saya sangat makanya saya melakukan penelitian, dan bukan cuma satu daerah di Sulawesi Selatan, saya pernah juga melakukan penelitian di Makassar, sekarang di daerah Patalasang, kemudian saya juga menulis dalam bentuk disertasi. Jadi itu adalah beberapa cara supaya ritual ini banyak diketahui oleh orang, meskipun sebenarnya sudah banyak yang merayakan. Ada beberapa wilayah, terutama di Pulau Jawa juga, mereka melaksanakan ritual ini dengan antusias. Kita bisa dapat melihat secara langsung melalui media-media ya pada setiap tanggal 10 Muharram. Cuman cara melaksanakannya itu berbeda dan penyebutannya juga berbeda. Kalau di Sulawesi Selatan itu menggunakan istilah Asyura. Ya, kalau di Jawa kalau tidak salah menggunakan istilah ada bahasanya tersendiri, Bu, saya tidak terlalu ingat. Ya, kalau dibilang ada aksesoris lain seperti karangan bunga dan segala macam, itu tadi saya katakan bahwa di sini sudah terintegrasi nilai-nilai lokal. Ya, jadi kalau menurut saya buket bunga itu kan termasuk tradisi lokal. Ya, tradisi. Ya,
sudah modernisasi.
Ya, jadi itu jawaban dari saya, mudah-mudahan ada.
Ya. Ya, makasih. Kita kembalikan ke Bapak Fahri. Bagaimana Bapak Fahri? Dari
sebenarnya maksud pertanyaan saya begini, maksudnya bagaimana untuk ke masyarakat nilai-nilai Asyura ini lebih
ditekankan.
Ya, maksud saya nilai-nilai value-nya gitu. Maksudnya cerita sejarah, bukan lebih ke kegiatan ritual selebrasi seperti seperti kayak jemur kasur, kemudian bikin bubur dan lain-lain. Karena ini relevan dengan penelitian kami pada saat kami di pulau-pulau, ketika kami menanyakan tentang Hari Asyura, itu identik dengan bubur, tapi ketika apa makna misalnya sejarah Asyura, itu mayoritas itu mungkin belum paham.
Iya.
Mungkin itu yang perlu strategi bagaimana supaya kita meningkatkan pengetahuan masyarakat berkaitan dengan hal tersebut.
Oke, makasih Pak, saya tanggapi kembali. Kebetulan saya memang juga orang sejarah. Ya, jadi memang kalau ketika kita mengkaji lebih luas terkait daripada Asyura ini di luar budaya-budaya masyarakat ya, di dalam itu kan banyak sekali peristiwa penting yang terkait dengan Hari Asyura. Salah satu diantaranya adalah menurut sejarah ya, bahwa Nabi Nuh itu selamat dari banjir bandang itu pada tanggal 10 Muharram atau Hari Asyura, sehingga pada saat itu kebetulan di kapal itu kan banyak penumpangnya, sementara makanan-makanan itu tidak cukup kalau kita olah dengan ini, makanya dibuatlah bubur itu supaya makanan itu cukup untuk semua penghuni yang ada di kapal. Namun masyarakat sekarang yang melakukan memperingati 10 Muharram itu direfleksikan dengan budaya tersendiri. Padahal dalam sejarah seperti itu, Pak. Kemudian ada masalah puasa ya, Pak ya, masalah puasa memang ini sangat identik dengan agama. Ya, sebelum Nabi hijrah ke Madinah, itu kan orang-orang Yahudi kan sudah berpuasa pada saat itu. Kemudian Nabi bertanya kepada orang-orang Yahudi, kenapa kalian berpuasa? Kemudian orang Yahudi menjawab, berpuasa karena Nabi Musa selamat dari kejaran Fir'aun. Nah, kemudian Nabi memerintahkan kepada para sahabat untuk berpuasa. Nah, kalau orang Yahudi kan 10 Muharram. Sementara Islam itu Nabi Muhammad pada saat itu menganjurkan kepada sahabat untuk berpuasa mulai tanggal 9 untuk membedakan antara orang-orang Yahudi dengan umat Islam pada saat itu. Ya, kemudian yang paling besar pengaruhnya itu Pak, peristiwa Karbala. Ya, peristiwa Karbala itu kan Hussein bin Ali ya, yang pada saat itu terjadi tragedi berdarah antara Hussein dengan Yazid bin Muawiyah. Itu kan Hussein pada saat itu terpenggal lehernya Pak. Iya, terpenggal lehernya, kemudian dikirim ke Madinah, dan hari itu bertepatan dengan 10 Muharram. Makanya saudara-saudara kita, orang-orang yang menganggap dirinya aliran Syiah, sangat menjunjung tinggi nilai-nilai ritual ini Pak, 10 Muharram. Jadi kalau kita kaji dalam sejarah banyak sekali Pak peristiwa terkait dengan 10 Muharram. Cuman saya lebih ke budaya masyarakat yang kami lakukan penelitian kemarin.
Iya, makasih Ibu Nurlidiawati. Bagaimana Pak Fahri? Sudah? Iya, makasih. Oke, next we move to the next question from sama dari Bapak Fahri juga, tapi ditujukan kepada Pak Taufik. Has behavior changed from conventional such as us watching TV, listening to the radio, newspaper, to social media and internet, which has caused money hoax?
Okay.
Yeah. Oke, silakan Bapak.
Okay, thank you very much Pak Fahri for your really good question. And I think Pak Fahri memorized during his children, right? His time. Okay. Yes, absolutely. The behavior was changed. Our X or Z generation, as we notice them all, they behave, of course, and we cannot say that this is the problem. Is the era. This is not the era problem, but the problem is. I remember that Ali bin Abi Talib said that teach your children. This, if I'm not mistaken, teach your children as like the generation. Maksudnya itu ya, ajarilah anakmu sesuai dengan generasinya. Ya. So ya, sangat berbeda dengan kondisi anak sekarang ini ya. Kan saya katakan ini absolutely sangat berubah sekali sikap-sikap mereka ini. During my childhood, I remember my parents before 10 o'clock at night. Our parents asked us to go to the bed, right? Jam 10 itu kita sudah disuruh tidur. Menonton televisi juga at that time. I remember Papa Arya, at that time television jam 10 ke atas itu biasanya sudah tidak ada siaran lagi. Ya, jadi memang kita tidur tenang ya, belajar pun ya, we are teaching and we can easily understand the meaning of the content, the meaning of what we study. But now the generation is different, they behave so different, and the X generation right now, they eyes on non-stop 24 hours in front of their gadgets. Ya, jadi generasi saya sekarang ini bisa sampai 24 jam Pak Fahri itu. Luar biasa mata mereka itu. Ya. I don't know, there's a playing game, watching YouTube, etc., including in their privacy room. We don't know what our children watching in their privacy room, in their room. Kita tidak tahu apa yang ditonton anak-anak kita di dalam kamar mereka. Maybe some hoaxes or fake news they access through their media. Oke, jadi pasti mereka menerima juga fake news, hoax ataupun apapun itu, dan kita juga pasti alami itu. So di sini and yes, I believe that behavior is changed. Yeah, the behavior was changed, and this is I suggest that digital literacy, meaning the ability to identify, to clarify, and to use information properly and ethically, and all citizens, especially the X generation, we have to save them all from these hoaxes, fake news, because as mentioned before, fake news is complicated Jadi memang mesti ada Pak kemampuan digital literasi tadi supaya anak-anak kita generasi yang akan datang ini mereka tidak mudah tidak mudah digiring dan terlibat dalam fake news itu, berita-berita bohong yang sampai dia sebarkan ke kiri kanan. Because our thumbs dulu kan biasanya mulut kita itu adalah harimaumu ya. But now our thumb is our lions, right? Right, Bu Indah. Really easy to share. Really easy to share ya. Okay, I think that's my my response to Pak Fahri.
Yep.
Then I move
Continue.
to the second question. Okay.
Yep. Continue.
Pak Mr. Iim Mahmudin.
Mr.
Thank
Iim.
you also
Yep.
for the question, Pak Iim. Regarding the handling of fake news, it seems that the government does limited to encountering hoaxes against government policy, not balance. Yes, I agree this. Yeah. The government couldn't combat the fake news, especially if yesterday or a few days ago, if Pak Iim watched on television or read online media, Pak Iim beberapa hari lalu bahwa undang-undang ITE khususnya pencemaran nama baik itu sudah dihapus, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I don't know how. Maybe our policy. The police government, maybe there are too many reports. Terlalu banyak laporan pencemaran nama baik, so they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle maybe every minute, every day. There are some people or community came to the police office, report about what we call it in English, defamation. If I'm not mistaken, pencemaran nama baik, Bu Indah, apa ya?
Yep.
Defamation.
Promotion.
Banyak saya pencemaran nama baik yang bisa berasal dari fake news tadi, and even Kominfo, Kementerian Komunikasi dan Informasi, before the pandemic, when the cyber crime is growing like mushrooms. Ketika cybercrime ini di internet di Indonesia khususnya itu sudah banyak sekali seperti jamur, they establish a cybercrime police agency. I mean not police agency, established by Kominfo. The objective of this agency is that one, to combat or to educate Indonesian citizen, to educate citizen in digital literacy. Supaya setiap orang itu tidak mudah terkena tadi fake news. Kita punya cybercrime dan kita juga punya if I'm not mistaken there is one agency in Kominfo, if I'm not Director General Aptika, Aptika. Aplikasi, I forgot. This is the citizen like me, for example. If somebody, mengejek saya dengan di sosial media atau apa, karena saya juga pernah mengalami seperti itu. Di Facebook saya itu saya dikata-katai, but ini kalau saya report, I screenshot, I capture the Facebook, and then I go to the police office, report. Undang-undang ITE, that's the problem. So I don't want to get more inside the trouble, so I just release, because I believe that these people, they don't realize what is the point is. Saya yakin biasanya itu karena kita tadi miscommunication.
Sure.
We have miscommunication through social media. Sometimes we just kidding, but maybe somebody seriously. Kita kadang bercanda tapi seorang
ditanggapi serius.
And then after that the end of is police officer. Okay. We don't want to get into trouble like that. And this was your comment. What can the community or community groups do be critical of hoaxes, consider that people are effective? Okay, back to the digital literacy. Pak Iim, my research is the same with my previous research that yes, every citizen needs digital literacy. Digital literacy is ability, is a skill, ability or a skill So let anybody they can identify, categorize, use information they receive, how to get the proper information he or she wanted, and of course in ethically, not in ethical but in etika, secara etis dia bisa, and critically. Jadi ada yang dia bisa menerima dengan secara etik dan juga bisa mungkin kritis. Nah, ini yang saya lihat kurang dimiliki yang banyak mungkin belum memiliki kemampuan digital literasi ini. I think that's all my response, Bu Indah.
Yep, but anyone question more, Pak?
Okay.
From the Bapak Fahri.
Okay.
Oh sorry. Only two, sorry. Ini untuk Bapak Fahri kayaknya. Ya, makasih Pak Taufik.
Okay, thank you.
Iya.
No feedback from
Tabe Bapak Iim. How about the response?
Well answered, Mr. Taufik. Thanks.
Thank you, Pak Iim.
Oke. Next, makasih Bapak Taufik. Kita ke Bapak Fahri ini. Ada pertanyaan buat Bapak Fahri. Oke, Bapak Fahri?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. How to keep this local wisdom in the modern era? Actually, in Polewali Mandar, we have sacred area, but now it is not sacred anymore. From siapa ini? Tunggu dulu. Dari
Ria.
Iya. Oke, Ibu Zohria. Oke.
Iya. Terima kasih. Izin saya jawab dalam bahasa Indonesia. Berdasarkan hasil penelitian kami di Kepulauan Spelmonde, mungkin demikian juga dengan pulau-pulau kecil yang ada di Sulawesi khususnya ya. Jadi memang di pulau-pulau kecil itu ada daerah-daerah seperti Taka-Taka atau pulau-pulau yang masih dianggap sangat keramat, dan berdasarkan hasil penelitian kami, masyarakat lokal masih sangat mempercayai hal tersebut. Jadi kadang kami bertanya apakah kenapa tidak ada yang melakukan penangkapan ikan di Taka-Taka tersebut. Masih sangat tinggi sebagaimana hasil penelitian kami tadi, bahwa mereka masih sangat mempercayai bahwa kalau kita tangkap ikan di situ akan datang penyakit atau apa. Dan ternyata berdasarkan hasil riset setelah dilakukan penyelaman, ternyata itu berdampak positif. Ekosistem terumbu karang di situ tumbuh sangat baik dibanding dengan daerah-daerah yang biasanya tempat melakukan penangkapan ikan dan pengerusakan seperti pengeboman dan lain-lain. Nah, di era zaman sekarang apakah hal tersebut akan termodernisasi? Saya rasa itu mungkin keniscayaan, seperti Pak Taufik tadi katakan bahwa mungkin kepercayaan itu akan semakin menurun. Namun tentu bukan kita harus tambah-tambahkan dengan hal-hal yang sifatnya mitologi. Misalnya, saya kurang sependapat ketika misalnya ada orang mengatakan kalau sudah misalnya turun ya kita takut-takuti lagi, bilang di situ ada setan, ada apa supaya. Nah, tentu kita butuh pendekatan lain, pendekatan yang lebih empiris, pendekatan yang lebih logis, menjelaskan bahwa perlunya perlindungan ekosistem dengan cara menggunakan alat tangkap yang ramah lingkungan dan lain-lain. Mungkin itu seperti tadi ada yang mengatakan bahwa itu saling melengkapi. Jadi tidak mesti kita harus kembalikan ke nilai-nilai mitologi, walaupun misalnya nilai itu masih ada, ya kita lengkapi dengan pendekatan-pendekatan yang lebih modern dan informasi. Ya, tentu kegiatan-kegiatan penyuluhan ini harus dilakukan secara berkesinambungan. Mungkin demikian penjelasan.
Oke, makasih Pak Fahri. Bagaimana Ibu Zohria? Ibu Zohria?
Iya, terima kasih banyak Pak. Iya, makasih.
Oke, sudah jelas ya. Oke, Tabe Bapak Taufik Sepertinya masih
ya.
ada satu pertanyaan ini dari Bapak Vito.
Oke. Ya, sebelum ke Bapak Mr. Vito, Pak Farid tadi from myth to true, ya, dari mitos ke akhirnya benar.
Iya, akhirnya
Setelah datangnya education itu. Oke, to Mas Vito, ya, what kind of digital literacy specifically that must campaign society? I think we don't need to big campaign. We don't need to big campaign. Tidak perlu kampanye besar. We start from our family members. We start from our community, tetangga-tetangga kita, and also and then in our maybe in university. Ya, seperti misalnya saya di grup dosen di sini, biasanya itu saya katakan, Mbak, ada juga yang academician itu sangat mudah sekali men-share fake news dan dia sebarkan di grup-grup itu. Ini kan tadi karena apa? Digital literasi tidak adanya kemampuan tadi menilai, mengevaluasi dan mengkritisi, ya, sehingga informasi sangat mudah sekali di ini. Jadi dan kalau misalnya kita, dan saya kira ada kawan-kawan, ya, Pak Mr. Vito, we have what we call it pegiat literasi in Indonesia, pegiat literasi. Sometimes they also campaign through social media, because through social media is efficient and effective way to speak up, dan juga apa, mungkin tadi ya saya pernah juga ini berbicara dengan Kominfo, ya, bahwa mereka sangat sulit memang memfilter seperti itu. Dengan tadi Pak Im, ya, sangat sulit mengcombat. Kalau kita melawan fake news seperti itu, muncul juga seperti apa jamur di musim ini, ya. Dan kita saya yakin polisi kita, ya, intelijen kita itu tahu di mana mereka semua yang meng-create fake news. They are good person in IT, but the problem is that penjara mungkin bisa penuh nanti. Ya, tapi ya mungkin kalau saya, ya, Pak Vito, oke, lebih baik kita tekankan saja di kemampuan ini. Kita beri kemampuan edukasi digital literasi ketika dimiliki oleh setiap orang, ya, saya insya Allah itu juga fake news itu berlalu begitu saja. Demikian Pak Mr. Vito, thank you for your question.
Okay, good answer, Mr. Taufik. But based on Microsoft Digitalization Index, that the netizen in Indonesia has a low civilized in social media.
Okay.
And 2021, the Kominfo itself released about the study. Digital literacy consists of 4 components: digital safety, digital ethics, digital culture, and digital. Sorry, I forgot the last one. So it's interesting to add that component in the article, maybe. Thank you very much for your
Thank you very much for your commenter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taufik. Okay, I think enough, yeah, for this session, because the time is over too. So I apologize if there are many mistakes during the session. I hope that the all knowledge from the presenter berguna bagi kita semua. Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.